Which cruisers can work for new as well as experienced riders, don't weigh as much as a tank and won't break the bank? I have picked 8 cruiser motorcycles to help answer that question for you. In price order, the 2022 Honda Rebel 500 that continues to be the second favorite bike for beginners in America, but is also much loved by a lot of experienced riders across the world. The Kawasaki Vulcan S that has a sport bike engine in a cruiser style body. The Honda Shadow Aero that looks like a big classic cruiser but is really considered a middleweight in the cruiser world. Its cousin, the Honda Shadow Phantom, comes at a premium for its sporty looks. The Suzuki Boulevard C50, which is an updated, fuel-injected reincarnation of the Suzuki Velour from the early 2000s. The 2022 Yamaha Bolt R spec, which is a bobber-style version of its scrambler cousin, the SCR 950. The Scout Bobber 60, which was called a 999cc starter bike by LA Times. And finally, the most expensive middleweight cruiser on the list, the Harley Davidson Iron 883 Sportster, which has the most unique sound, and despite all the criticisms, I just couldn't ignore it because it's still available in the top 4 countries that watch my videos. And before I compare them all in prices, performance, comfort, looks, sound, and reliability, here's a 5-second intro of what this channel is all about. The 2022 Honda Rebel 500, or CMX Rebel 500 as it's called in the UK, is the cheapest on the list. It's got a standard trim and a special edition trim with ABS as standard and some cosmetic upgrades. The 2022 Kawasaki Vulcan starts at a price point slightly above the Rebel 500, but you do get a bigger and more powerful motorcycle. The Vulcan is also available in learner versions for UK and Australia. India only gets one variant in 2022, which is BS6 compliant. That's an emission norm similar to Euro 5. The Honda Shadow Aero costs a bit more than the Vulcan S, though it's only sold in the US for 2022, and so is the Shadow Phantom for $100 more. It was available as the Shadow 750 or VT 750 in the UK until 2015, so you could always buy a used one if you really like it a lot. There are a few things to watch out for that I will talk about when we get to the reliability part of the comparison. In the US, one could get the Suzuki Boulevard C50 for $600 more. The US gets the 2021 standard and touring variants. Australia only gets C50T for touring. Unfortunately, the UK and India don't get one. Yamaha also favors the US for their sporty bobber style cruiser, the Yamaha Bolt R spec for $8,600, which is not available in any other 3 countries in 2022. And finally, if you're willing to spend $9,000, you could get the first American-made middleweight cruiser on the list, the Indian Scout Bobber 60. In the UK, Australia, and India, you can get its older brothers at a steep price tag. The Harley Davidson Iron 883 beats them all when it comes to being expensive, especially for what you're getting for your money, but we'll talk more about that when we talk performance and equipment. There are 2 more middleweight motorcycles that are expected to launch later this year and would almost match the power and beat the prices of all of these, but upcoming motorcycles at the end of the video. For now, let's focus on how these bikes compare in terms of performance. The Honda Rebel 500's 471cc parallel twin engine makes 46 horsepower and 32 foot-pounds of torque, which can push it to speeds of up to 105 miles an hour on a good run. Even though it's not the least powerful motorcycle, its 408 curb weight makes it a favorite among beginners. Experienced riders fall in love with it because it rarely gives them an opportunity to show off their mechanical skills, because it just keeps going on and on and on like a Duracell battery. Not the Energizer Bunny though, that would be the 2022 Kawasaki Vulcan S, which is the fastest cruiser on this list. My favorite motor vlogger actually drag raced it with a Harley Davidson CVO and a Triumph Rocket 3 and was super impressed. The Vulcan S has a 649cc parallel twin engine that comes straight off the Ninja 650 and has been tuned slightly differently. But any experienced rider can tell you that an engine with 60 horsepower and 46 foot-pounds of torque on a 498-pound body can easily do speeds in excess of 110 miles an hour, which seems quite a lot by cruiser standards. Both bikes have 6-speed transmission and are chain driven much like their sport versions. The Honda Shadow, however, is the first one in this comparison that's shaft driven, which means no need for chain cleaning and lubing every few hundred miles. Both the Aero and the Phantom share a 745cc liquid cooled V-twin engine that makes 2 ponies less than the Rebel 500 but 1 extra foot-pound of torque than the Vulcan. The Phantom weighs 549 pounds and the Aero weighs 560 pounds fueled up and ready to go. The internet claimed top speed seems to be in the neighborhood of 95 miles an hour, though this would be one of those bikes that I would imagine would please the ones interested in cruising and not chasing top speeds. In fact, that would be true for the Boulevard C50 as well, which is a direct competitor of the Honda Shadow Aero. Has a slightly bigger 805cc liquid-cooled V-twin engine that makes about the same power and torque and also claims to have a similar top speed. At 611 pounds, it's the heaviest bike in this entire comparison, even though in the cruiser world, it's still considered middleweight. The C50 also has a 5-speed transmission and it's shaft driven just like the Shadow, but it's been called out to have a little bit of a shaft lash or a noticeable clank while shifting. The Yamaha Bolt R spec has a 942cc air and oil-cooled V-twin engine and makes 65 horsepower and 59 foot-pounds of torque, which makes it the second most powerful and torquey cruiser on this list. This one is belt-driven with 5-speed transmission and a top speed of 105 miles an hour. You may now begin to see that even though the engine sizes of these bikes are different, the performance capability do make them comparable in gradual step-ups from 44 horsepower all the way to 78 horsepower, which would be the Scout Bobber 60. It's the smallest bike Indian Motorcycles makes and has a 1000cc engine that makes 78 horsepower and 65 foot-pounds of torque. With a 548 pounds curb weight, the top speed is comparable to the others. All these top speed claims could change in the hands of different riders and different riding conditions. In fact, Harley Davidson is out to dispel the slow image of cruisers in general and has even started a bagger racing class in the Moto America Racing Series. At the moment though, the Iron 883 Sportster is the American cruiser that comes close to being reasonably compared to the rest of the lot. The 883 air-cooled V-twin engine makes 51 horsepower and 54 foot-pounds of torque delivered through the 5-speed belt-driven transmission. The bike weighs 564 pounds and the top speed is comparable to the American rival. The Yamaha Bolt would be considered its Japanese rival, and since the weight varies across these bikes, here's a view of the power to weight ratio comparison to give you an indication of what kind of acceleration you might expect. The Rebel 500 isn't going to be a slouch, and the Scout Bobber 60's big metal hunk of a bike would have more get-go than the others. And with those combinations of engine size, power, and weight, let's look at how far each of these bikes would let you cruise before the tank runs dry. Rebel 500 has the best fuel efficiency, but the small tank limits its range to 190 miles. The Vulcan S seems to be limited to 168 miles on one tank. The Honda Shadow seems to be the horse for the long hauls that could touch 200 miles before it runs dry. The 2021 Boulevard seems to have the lowest range at 158 miles, even though it has the biggest fuel tank, but its weight doesn't seem to help its touring capability. The Yamaha Bolt can do a respectable 51 miles per gallon and potentially right behind the Rebel when it comes to range. But if guzzling gas was the contest, the Scout Bobber 60 would be a clear winner with its low fuel efficiency and consequent 146 mile range. In contrast, the Iron 883 seems to be the more efficient American cruiser, which seems to be capable of 50 miles a gallon if ridden right. The fuel efficiency figures are based on user-reported figures on Fuelly.com and would of course vary based on riding styles, riding conditions, and weight carried. And on top of that, you must also account for a fuel stop before it actually does run dry. And now that you have an idea of how these bikes compare in terms of power, speed, and range, let's look at things that would influence rideability and comfort. The seat height across all the bikes is quite similar, with the exception of the Honda Shadow and the Scout Bobber 60 that sit a little lower than the rest, and the Iron 883 that interestingly sits the highest. I would imagine given those specs, these would be some of the most approachable bikes for most of the riders when it comes to seat height. The ground clearance is also fairly similar across the board. The Honda Rebel 500 has a bit of a sports stance with mid-mounted foot controls. Telescopic forks are non-adjustable and twin rear shocks have preload adjustability to account for rider weight. The suspension is reasonably confidence-inspiring for the purpose it is built. Both wheels are 16 inches, front tire is a 130/90 and the rear is a 150/80. You also get an assist slipper clutch so that pulling the clutch lever doesn't feel like a forearm workout and aggressive downshifts don't cause a wheel hop. In fact, it's the only bike in the comparison that gets that feature. Its 35-degree lean angle is also very helpful when you're going through corners. Most bigger cruisers can only dream of that lean angle. The Vulcan boasts of the same leaning ability, but the Kawasaki differentiates itself with the Ergo Fit, which means that you get to customize the handlebars, seat, and foot pegs before you even take it off the dealership. The forks are also telescopic and non-adjustable, but the rear is an interesting lay-down offset single shock with preload adjustability. The Kawasaki suspension is actually better than some of the bigger, more expensive cruisers that we will get to in a minute. The tire configuration is slightly different with a 120/70 on an 18-inch front wheel and a 160/60 on a 17-inch rear wheel. Since it does go pretty fast, I would recommend getting a windscreen to reduce the wind blast. The Shadow also has forward foot controls, but the riding style is far more traditional with longer wheelbase and a conservative lean angle with lower seat height. The telescopic forks are non-adjustable and dual rear shocks have preload adjustability. For tires, it gets 120/90/17 fronts and 160/80/15 rear tires. Both the Shadow and the Phantom are going to need a lot more care while taking corners compared to the Honda or the Kawi. That's actually similar to the Suzuki Boulevard, which is a traditional style cruiser with its forward mounted foot controls and is more for chilling on the highway than speeding through the canyons. The C50 has telescopic non-adjustable forks and link type preload adjustable single rear shock. And to carry all that weight, it's got 130/90/16 for the front and 170/80/15 rear tire, which makes it possibly the fattest tire set in the comparison. The Yamaha Bolt R spec also has mid controls like the Rebel 500, and the telescopic forks are non-adjustable. The rear suspension is an upgrade over the older model and has twin piggyback reservoir shocks for a comfortable ride. The seating position is more upright, similar to a naked bike. In fact, mid-mounted versus forward-mounted is also a matter of personal preference, so I would highly recommend sitting on one of the bikes to make up your mind about the seating comfort. The R-Spec gets a thinner set of tires and comes with 190/19 fronts and 150/80/16s for the rear, which contribute to making it pretty agile for a cruiser. The Iron 883 also has the same tire specs. The Scout Bobber 60 has been criticized for very little suspension travel and limited cornering ability, even though they do claim a 31-degree lean angle. It does have forward controls and tire combination is similar to the Rebel 500. The Harley Davidson Iron 883 has an even more conservative 27-degree lean angle, though it does have mid controls in an attempt to live up to its sporty positioning. The Iron 883 has also been criticized for not having the best suspension or brakes, especially for the steep price tag. You would find Harley fans claiming it's a bike builder's dream, but I intend to make this video for bike riders instead. The Evo engine that makes a distinct Harley noise is what a lot of people like, and that's where we segue into the subjective part of the comparison, looks and sound. And I'm sure you would have your own individual preference, so I'll stick to my personal top 3 specifically in the looks department. First one would be the Scout Bobber 60, which I find to be the best looking for its sporty, modern and premium looks, followed by the Iron 883 for the same reason. I do like the Vulcan S a lot because it looks like a baby version of the Harley Davidson V-Rod that used to be my favorite Harley. I would love to find out which one do you think looks the best and how much would that influence your buying decision. And while you type it away, here's a quick exhaust note comparison of all these bikes. I'm sure the looks and sound of at least one of these would have struck a chord with you, so let's get back to the practical parts. The probability of the bike not breaking down on you when you're out and about. That is reliability. And before we do that, please hit the like button if you appreciate the research and work put into making this video. You could consider subscribing if you want to watch more comparison videos. Back to reliability. The Honda Rebel 500 is probably the most reliable bike on the list, which I can say based on my personal experience having ridden 2 Hondas over 5 years and thousands of miles. The Vulcan and the Bolt are also known to be super reliable. The Bolt gives the added advantage of a belt drive, which means chain maintenance on long trips is also one less thing to worry about. The Honda Shadow would be even better in that area because of its shaft drive that lasts even longer. In case you're planning to buy a used Honda Shadow, just be careful about models between 2010 and 2016 which were recalled for engine vibrations. You want to confirm that the recall related repairs were done if the specific bike qualified. The Suzuki Boulevard C50 has a bulletproof engine and is known for easy and low maintenance rides. The shaft lash may take a bit of getting used to, so do pay attention to that. The Scout Bobber 60 60 is also belt driven, though some anecdotal cases suggest that the gearbox is not super reliable. The suspension and brakes have also been criticized on the Indian as well as the Harley Davidson Iron 883. I would encourage you to do a bit more research about that aspect if you're planning to buy one of these bikes and prefer riding bikes over fixing bikes. But then it's not like every Harley fails or a Honda never breaks down. And if you're not in a rush to buy a motorcycle right away, there are two new motorcycles that are coming up later in 2022. After the success of Royal Enfield Continental GT and the Interceptor 650, Royal Enfield is bringing more bikes using that same platform. A Royal Enfield Super Meteor 650 that was recently spotted testing on the streets of India. That one's closer to a cruiser style with forward mounted foot controls. And a Shotgun 650 which they recently showcased at EICMA with mid-mounted foot controls and bobber style bodywork. Both bikes use the same 648cc air and oil cooled parallel twin engine that makes 47 horsepower and 38.5 foot-pounds of torque, and the bikes are capable of 100 miles an hour, a claim that I feel pretty comfortable about since I've ridden the Interceptor 650 on Indian roads. The best part is that if the $6,000 price tag of the Interceptor 650 is anything to go by, those bikes would almost certainly undercut all the other bikes on this list. And that brings me to the question, which one is the best one for you? Well, the answer is quite simple, the one that tugs to your heart and you're willing to live with its quirks. If you would like to evaluate more options, you can watch more comparison videos on my channel comparing touring bikes, retro bikes, naked bikes, and even sport bikes. This is Faraz, helping the rider community one video at a time.